Ladies and gentlemen, today is September 15th, 2015, and this is the KNKL SHOW, episode 258, where we learn to be better artists. Today is Tutorial Tuesday, and today what we're going to be doing is jumping into the latest issue and page of Emma, right? Because I have been a little bit overworked and I need to take a little break from Splatoon. Don't worry, we're going to be getting back into that. But we just released the latest page and I figured I would do a time-lapse shoutcast as well as like a little bit of an explanation for a couple of my techniques that go into making comics for all of you comic makers out there. So let's go ahead and talk about that. But before we get into that, actually, we need to take a stroll down the lovely lane because you guys are submitting so many awesome pieces. Look at this. Look at these amazing pieces. I love them so much. If you'd like to go see all of these for yourself, just type in that tiny URL back by the Facebook blue right to my left, right? Go check it out for yourself, like the page, and come get some cookies. Really good job on that, by the way. Great art coming in from Mr. Whoever drew this. Who was it? Brandon. Brandon, I love your Emma. Awesome, awesome stuff. Alrighty then, ladies and gentlemen, with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the actual thing. So, okay. So this is all well and good. You look at the comic page when it's finally done, and you're like, "Oh wow, isn't that nice? Look at those great colors. Look at this chandelier. I've never drawn a chandelier in my life. Well, except for on page 24, 25. I've never drawn this many chandeliers on one page in my entire life." And you might be wondering, well, how did you get like the perspective of like the metal rings? And like how did you like lay out that background, and how did you know what colors to pick, right? All that's going to be revealed in a second. But first, let's start from ground zero. Let's start from ground zero, which is right here, because this is where the comic begins. This is the most important part. This is where, this is what I call the sketch phase, right? Where we're just laying out our good old page, and we start dropping in some panels, figuring out like how our reader is going to flow through the page, right? We've been learning a lot about flow with the Splatoon piece, and that is also applied in comic book making. It's very, very important to know where the eyes of your reader are going to go. And I'll give you a hint. They should go in a Z formation. Z formations are very friendly, and we like that stuff. So notice how everything is already complementing that Z formation. All right, so but let's not get too much into that. I know why you showed up. You just want to get entertained. Let's just get to the time lapse, right? So that sketch is done. Now we're going to immediately start moving into the blue line stage, which is basically where we finally start figuring everything out. We start really laying down what the final lines are going to be like. Start sculpting in like the proper perspective. Basically figuring out the expression, the final expression, but keeping the same expression that we had in the beginning, right? Even though it was just a little stick figure. Even though it was just a little stick figure that looks like this, I want you guys to notice something. These sketches right here, these little expressions are things that I'm always referring back to because there's something that gets captured in this early stage that's hard to kind of recreate. And if you're not careful, you can do something that I like to call polish it away. You polish it too much and then it disappears. It's not there anymore. So I'm always referring back to my original sketches. Whoa, totally messed that up. All right, anyway. So back to the time lapse, always referring back to those original sketches, moving on. Now, you'll notice that there are a couple different things that I did here early on with Emma's feet, right? Because originally I was trying to figure out how the heck am I going to make her feet work. And just like I talk about preserving expressions, oftentimes when I find that I'm struggling with certain things, like, oh man, these feet just look weird. I feel like the sketch had like more exaggerated perspective. I feel like the beginning, it was much more, there was more like foreshortening, right? Foreshortening is what I was looking for. It was better foreshortening. And the reason why is because the leg was actually going all the way down to the end of the piece. It was reaching all the way to the end of the actual page. So you can see me there. It looks like she's dancing around, but that's just me looking at all the different layers and comparing and seeing which one looks the best. All right, now that we got that out of the way, let's go ahead and move into the chandelier, okay? Now, I have not, like I said, I haven't drawn this many chandeliers ever in my life. I've learned very much. I've learned very much about chandeliers. I've studied them very closely on Google image search, right? To learn about how it actually works, like the refracting of the light through the little gems that dangle and all kinds of different designs and things like that. Like what makes a chandelier look cool. And it's been quite a bit of fun. It's been quite a bit of fun, I'll admit. But probably the most important thing that you'll see me do is right now, I think I'm actually kind of like eyeballing this. I think I'm kind of eyeballing this perspective. And then eventually what you'll see me do is I will take the circular marquee tool, which is over there on the way over there on the left, see where my mouse is, not the flickering mouse in the middle, right over here, that marquee tool. I'll take the circular mouse marquee and see, I'm doing it right there. I just laid out the perfect perspective. So that way I knew exactly what that chandelier should be doing. Then I kind of cleaned up those metal edges, like the metal ring that goes around that holds the little gems in place. All right, continuing. There we go. And that comes in handy. For those of you who are curious how or why I did that, take a look at the perspective episode that we did like a couple of weeks ago where we talked about the Splatoon guns, because that details everything. It details all that good stuff. Ellipses, boxes, kind of in a little bit of a sloppy way, but whatever. It gets the point done. It gets the thing done. And yeah, we have a good time with that. All right, so next up we have this chandelier, which I am totally eyeballing up here, but I figure I can get away with it because it's small. It's up in the corner. No one's going to really notice. They're all going to be looking at the big one in the middle, right? So it's like, maybe I can cheat it. Maybe I can cheat it. Now, sometimes this works. Sometimes cheating the perspective works. Sometimes it doesn't work. So you got to understand that you are rolling the dice. You are rolling the dice every time you do this. And it is good to understand like the frameworks of what makes a proper perspective, right? Because that's what I'm doing. I know the rules that go into making it perfect, and then I kind of just try to shortcut it, kind of try to just get it in there so that way it looks right, and then I just like, okay, that's good enough. Tiny little panel in the top right, whatever, it's all good. So, it looks like I'm taking a bit of a break there. Okay, there we go, okay. A little coffee break there. What happens on the time lapse in like 5 seconds is me literally like getting up and like making dinner for like 45 minutes. Actually, I don't know if it's really that exaggerated, but whatever. Coffee break, why not? Tea break, because I don't drink coffee. I drink Zing tea, Zing mango tea, which is really, really good. For those of you who haven't tried it, go get it. Go get it at your local grocer. It's really good. By the way, this episode is sponsored by Zing tea. So anyway, let's continue. You know what else goes good with Zing tea? A grand gala night. A gala night dinner party with a great chandelier. All right, now I'm getting ahead of myself. All right, so, okay, a lot just happened there. Okay, take a look what's going on right here with the background, because you'll notice that everything is in black and white. And then magically, before your very eyes, oh my gosh. Whoa, okay, did I skip something in the time lapse? No, I did not. I just applied something called a gradient map, and I'm going to show you what that is right now. For those of you who are familiar with the comic or have seen me work on this a few times in the past, you know that this is how I like to work with my backgrounds. So let's go ahead and take away this, and let's go ahead and take a look at this layer right here. Okay, so this magical layer right here, which I have not zoomed out so you can't see it, but this magical layer right down here is what we call a gradient map. So if we take that away, watch what happens. Takes us back to our black and white. How does a layer add color? Well, I'm going to show you that right now. Okay, so check this out. This is why I like to do all of my backgrounds like this. So let's say that you've got your background, right? So this is like, say, like your lines. You got some values in here. You got like some extra shadow, shading. Basically, you compose your background in just values, just black and white, okay? Seems simple enough. You don't have to worry about colors. You don't have to worry about any of that. Now what I'm going to ask that you do when you want to do a gradient map is you go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and then you head on down to Gradient Map. Now check that out. Okay, now I have a bunch of like preset ones here, but basically this is the way a gradient map works. So you have this selection of a bunch of like preset ones, which I don't know why you would ever choose these. Why would you want a gradient map that went like from blue to yellow, back to blue? I don't know what they were thinking. I should probably delete these. But the point is that this is a really, really cool tool. So let's say that I go ahead, I think I picked like this one to start with. Something like, or maybe it was like this one. No, I think it was this one that I started with. Okay, so basically the way that this thing works right here is you have this slider at the bottom. And what I want you to think about is that everything on the left side represents your dark tones, your blacks, always, and going all the way up to your whites, okay? And these are your values. Now, basically what you're doing is you're assigning colors to values, okay? So let's say, oh, and here's the other cool thing, is see how this all appears very, very dark? Well, if I take those dark colors, those dark sliders, and I move them to the left, watch what happens. It now begins changing the piece. Isn't that interesting? Starts changing the piece. So you want to think, if you move more of your dark colors to the left, it is now assigning those colors to darker grays. It's darker grays. So another way to think about it is like you're adjusting the lighting of the piece. You're almost adjusting the exposure of the piece. So basically what I do is I go through here and I'll select different colors. I mean, I picked this one just because I think I'd used it in the past for like previous backgrounds and stuff like that. Sort of like these, you know, yellows going down to like kind of like these orange reds, and then kind of like almost like this desaturated red. That's another nice thing to do, is that as you get towards your shadows, like the same things that I've taught you guys about before, is interesting color transitions. You'll start up here, right? See how we're desaturated? Then as you go towards the, kind of like transitionary colors, now you're moving over, you're going saturated, okay? Saturated, and then you go back desaturated. You're going down, you're darkening and desaturating. And that will give us what we call an interesting transition, and you'll have a good time with that, okay? So that's basically what I'm doing. I'm laying in these basic, I'm basically laying in color maps or gradient maps, okay? And that was the example one. This is the one I actually ended up using. So a little bit lighter, right? Let's take a look at this. See, so I actually ended up replacing those colors with just lighter tones because I wanted to make sure that this chandelier behind Emma really like felt like it was glowing, like it was really super bright. And then the shadows, right, that would be on Emma, like you have these really bright highlights along like the sides of her body. And then the shadows on the inside would be very dark. So it would have this really cool, like overexposed kind of effect. Like you were literally looking into a chandelier and it was almost kind of like blinding you a little bit. So, and we've talked about exposure, but I should probably do another episode on exposure because I could probably talk about it a lot better now. But basically, okay, so that's the gradient map. Done and done. Now, let's go ahead and move on to the next part of the time lapse because we got a lot of stuff to do. We got a lot of ways to go still, even with the gradient maps all done. So the next thing that I do once I complete the gradient maps is basically I like to think about the gradient maps represent probably the most occurring color. Like what's the most prominent color in this? And they're going to be a lot of warm colors, right? We're going to have oranges and yellows. But you also notice how probably one of the more important things, oh, dang, I totally almost forgot this. So take a look at this gradient map. Probably one of the most important things that you can do in any gradient map, I always like to play around with a cool color. Always throw in a cool color to kind of balance things out. And in this case, I mean, it's not like blue or anything, but it is a red and it is desaturated. It is cooled off, you could say, right? And then you get things like this. So basically, right here, see how you go from like this orange and then as it goes darker, right? Because this is being applied to a darker color. See how now it actually cools off and goes like grayish? This color, you look at this color and you say, what color is that? Oh, it's probably like kind of like a blue. It's probably kind of like a desaturated blue, but it's not. It is actually nothing because you can't select, I forgot you can't select those colors. It is actually a desaturated red, but it appears blue. It appears cooler than everything around it, and therefore you have a cool color added in. Those are always probably one of the most important things that I could tell you guys today. If you don't get anything else from this time lapse, just remember that. If you're doing gradient maps and just choosing colors in general, it's always good. If you ever feel like your piece needs balancing, oftentimes you just need to introduce some cool colors or maybe some desaturated colors. Like if you're predominantly warm colored, then you need to take those reds, take those oranges, try desaturating them, putting some of those desaturated colors into your shadows. You know, same thing goes for cool colors. Try putting some desaturated blues or reds into your shadows. It'll really balance out your piece, make it look really cool. All right, so that's quite the mouthful. I feel like I'm trying to explain like everything as this time lapse goes. It's been a while since I've actually done a time lapse shoutcast, but it is very fun. There's me checking my perspective again, making sure I'm not messing up, making sure I don't mess up. Let's go ahead and zoom in again. All right, so but yes, once I finish that off, now I start lighting the characters because I got a general idea what my ambient colors are going to be, right? We're learning about ambience in our Splatoon piece. So now I know how this character is going to be lit. how the colors of the environment are also going to be affecting like the shadows, right? You also notice how in Emma's face, there's a little bit of like an ambient light that's lighting her from the bottom. I like to imagine this as like the lights are on the ceiling, right? Going down to the floor and then reflecting back up, right? So you're gonna have reflected light underneath your character as well. Also really helps to create sort of like a dramatic effect. Really looks cool. Plus it makes her legs look really cute, like having that little shine on it. So, shine on. So anyway, let's continue with the overpainting. Now we're moving into overpainting, which is the next part of gradient mapping. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys what my overpaints do. What do overpaints do? So there's a couple of things that I like to do with my overpaints. I'm going to go ahead and turn each of these layers on one at a time, and you can take a look at what happens. So here's layer 1. Here is layer 1. So basically what my overpainting is doing is I'm taking my chalk brush. For those of you who don't know, that is my custom brush, which you can download. I do have the link down in the description on DeviantArt. You can go ahead and get all these brushes. So I take the chalk brush and now I'm going through and I'm really starting to like add in, like you can see I'm adding in some more darks, kind of like changing up, like really figuring out what my values are going to be, right? So there's like layer 1. Here's another one where I decided to kind of change the geometry of the, well, let me go ahead and pull this up so you can see it a little easier. Change the geometry of this metal ring as well as fix my values, because notice how there's a problem that we were running into here. It's like, okay, well, I want this, like this is going to be the dark part of the ring, and then the underside is being lit by all these crystals, right? So that can be the light part. But then the problem that I ran into was that, oh, but then like the inside, right? What about behind the metal ring? Isn't this going to be lighter? Wouldn't there be so much more light inside the chandelier than actually is being reflected on the metal? You know, so I then see how I changed the values from the inside being bright and the outside being darker. And it also changed kind of the geometry or the look of the ring itself. And I liked that. So it was a little bit of an accident, but I was like, okay, whatever, it makes me look cool. So let's go ahead and do that. And then the last thing that I do is, oh, is it even on here? I don't even know what's on here. It might be on this one. Oh yeah, and then the very last thing that I do once I get all that stuff in is I sharpen, which is basically taking my Reptar brush, which is this one right here. And if you're curious why I call it the Reptar brush, you'll find out in just a second as soon as I, okay, there we go. Yeah, okay, so take a look at this brush. Tell me what you see in there. Tell me what you see in there. Right, there you go. All right, so I go around, I take this brush, and this is called the Sharpen Layer. So see how this is basically with it off and then on. See how now I'm basically just taking the same exact colors that are there, but now I'm sharpening my edges, So, and what this does is it just makes your comic look a lot more professional. It makes it look a lot more professional because you got these nice, you got this beautiful line art, right? Talking about my own line art. You got this beautiful line art, right, around Emma. And then you have the background, and if the background isn't as sharp, it's gonna look a little bit kind of faded, kind of blurry, unfinished. So going through with this, and here I'll go ahead and show you what I do. So let's say like kind of taking this and I'm kind of painting this in, kind of cleaning up those edges, right? Cleaning up those edges. And then you have these nice hard lines, Even if it's still a little messy, the fact that your transitions are sharp makes it look much more believable, and it makes it feel more like it's a part of the style. Makes it feel like it's more of a cohesive style. All right. So let's go ahead and move into the final part of this time lapse, and then we are done. And I'm not going to forget my sponsors today because I forgot them last time, and I'm a terrible person. All right, so last but not least, we put in our speech bubbles. And then thank heaven we are done. Thank heaven we are done with this. All righty, ladies and gentlemen. So with all that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and call it good. Let's go ahead and take it one more pan through. Let's just take a look at everything. The last few things, the last notes that I would say is that, oh yeah, the same thing I did up with this background up here. Same process, right? Early on, here, let me go ahead and pull that up. Okay, so early on, let's go ahead and deconstruct this top background, and then we're done. So now that you guys know my process, let's take a look. Okay, so here's what the background looked like in the beginning, right? Black and white. Here's our good old gradient map. Boom. So check that out. What kind of colors are we using? Okay, well, we actually use darker colors here. We've got a bright yellow going down to this orange, then to red, and then we have this very dark and desaturated red. Very cool. We got hue shifts, we got saturation shifts, we got all that stuff going on. Makes it look really nice. Okay. Oh, and this is the most important thing. I almost forgot about this. Okay, so let's say you're using gradient maps, and then you get to this point and you're like, okay, well, it looks good, but it totally looks like a gradient map. How do I make it not look like a gradient map, Keenan? The key lies in tertiary colors. Tertiary colors. And that's a fancy word for a color on the canvas that doesn't exist yet. So basically, let's talk about like adding in slightly different hues. So here I added in a little bit more of a brown, right? More of a brown. And then here I added in more like blues and desaturated colors. So check this out. Like this looks like a cooled off color. You could say that it's more of a like a blue. Like you're adding blue to this orange, right? You got this orange and then you go here. How did we get there? How did we get to here, right? Well, we moved to more to reds and then we desaturated. And this is what I'm talking about. Like you don't need to throw in, like it's not like your gradient map is orange and then you just start throwing in blues and purples. Oftentimes what you have to do is just pick your colors, pick your dominant colors, like say this orange, and then just desaturate it a little bit. Desaturate it, maybe move it towards a more cooler palette, like towards the purples, more towards reds. And then once you start adding those colors in, now it starts looking less like a gradient map. Isn't that interesting? It starts rounding out the canvas, rounding out your color palette. And it looks freaking awesome. Alrighty then, people. With all that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and end today's show. Oh yeah, and the most important part, if you want to go check out this page on the comic, the link to my website for the comic and the latest page is in the description on YouTube. So go check that out. Check it out. If you haven't seen the comic in a while, we've made a couple pages since then, and I think you'll enjoy it. Alrighty, before we take off, ladies and gentlemen, I do have to say a very special thank you to my sponsors, the defenders of the KNKL Kingdom, David Chiariello and Laura Bashir. Thank you guys so much for sponsoring the show. These are, if you'd like to sponsor the show, then you can go to Patreon. That's what these people did. Lovely people. Got animated portraits of themselves and all that good stuff. And yeah, you can access that just by clicking that little link right there. You can get all kinds of goodies and cool stuff. All right, guys. Thank you for joining me on YouTube. Thumbs up if you like it. Thumbs down if you don't. My name is Keenan Lafferty. I'll see you guys on Thursday for a good old thoughtful. Until then, you guys take care. I am so tired. But you guys are awesome.